My name is Bryan Vega. So I have lived in Imperial County all my life. I am from Hopeville, California, the carrot capital of the world, as you may have already known that. It is also arguably the best city in all of Imperial County. Um, so I did all the schools, and then I did a year at IBC, and then I left the county, and then got a bachelor's degree in political science, public policy, with a minor in American ethnic studies from the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. And so I graduated there December of 2019. And after that, I worked in LA for some times, working in legal offices, doing like a range of different areas of the law, focusing on labor issues like wrongful terminations. And then in the end, I was working on voting rights lawsuits following the 2020 census, doing some civil rights law stuff. And most recently, I've been working in the clean energy technology sector, developed in the Lithium Valley. As you know, it is the talk of the town. And what I was working on there is I was working for an organization that uses public funds, so ratepayer money, that is set aside to be reinvested into the California electric system, whether that may be grids or the clean energy transition. You know, we have these very ambitious climate goals to get rid of internal combustion engine cars and transition to electric vehicles. So I was working for a company that funded the technology behind all of that. So naturally, I found myself here in Imperial Valley again. Really curious that you say that because usually it's kind of like you're either with the people that are about the development or more like the environmentalists, right, or labor or education. So what was cool about being part of the clean energy sector is that it kind of encompasses a little bit of everyone. There's a education component to it, and there's, you know, like a water component to it. There's a land component to it, and there's also a very big community piece to it. So with this organization, I kind of had the flexibility of meeting with people who would not otherwise be in that same room, right? But it was also my responsibility to ensure that labor and education, that they're having constructive conversations. But I should say, I was only ever doing what I was allowed to do by the community, right? If labor is not interested in meeting with me, I'm not forcing anything. So I would say I'm a little bit all over the place because there is no technology sector in Imperial County, although I think that would be a really good investment if we would see the technology sector sort of evolved around agriculture to make it resilient for climate change and just the modern day economy that we find ourselves in. Yeah. It's funny because I grew up here, right? And I feel like I didn't learn about the Salton Sea until I left. And that's kind of tragic because I'm a big history nerd. So now I have such appreciation for, I know it's the longest standing environmental disaster, but there's a lot of history there and how we got there. First and foremost, I recognize that Salton Sea is the remnants of the ancient lake Great Kauai. You know, they're the earliest inhabitants of the what we now call Imperial Valley. So it really started with them. And I believe it was connected to the Gulf of California that comes up from Mexico. So, you know, and when you open up that can of worms, it's you go into like the California Development Company history that would then eventually evolve into the Imperial Irrigation District that we now have. So how I associate the Salton Sea is really like a character in this, a character of itself in this picture, whether it's like the Imperial County timeline or the Lithium Valley development as it's happening, right? The Salton Sea is alive and there's a lot of advocates for it. So I think they're doing a good job at reminding us like the importance of preserving and conserving it. But if I had to say it, I would say that the Salton Sea will really be our test as humanity for our community. If we are able to have this development in a way that doesn't further degrade that ecosystem, we will have done the job well. it is depressing when you look at it, especially I think coming from the perspective of this is the largest economy in the world. And yet it seems like when it comes to our region and our environment, there was never any funding for it, but there's a lot of funding out there for a bunch of different things. So that to me depresses me. And also, I reckon that it will require a massive investment to be able to restore the Salton Sea. And as a political science nerd, naturally, I am upset. I'm upset because I feel like although a lot of good work has happened, there's a big disconnect between having kind of like that respect for what the Salton Sea is and where these developments are going. Right now, there's a lot of really cool projects happening, like animal habitat restoration projects. But at the same time, we're not seeing any comprehensive studies on like just how bad is the water getting? What are the factors into this? And not coming from a point of pointing the finger, but more from a point of objectivity. How is it actually getting this bad? I also think that it's depressing because I come across pictures all the time of what the Salton Sea used to be, and there's people still alive today in our society that will talk about, they'll reminisce about how amazing it used to be to pull up and to like catch corvina and to, swim and surf and do all these things. And I know that sometimes people talk about like the celebrity aspect to that, but I think for ourselves, like the fact that we had that, and that we did not know how to preserve it is a little depressing, but I'm optimistic that, we will be able to, I don't think we'll be able to restore it to what it used to be, but I think we could make it not a hazard, for lack of a better term. It's just devastating. It looks dead. It looks like you wouldn't be shocked if nothing was alive there. But, to everyone's relief, there's a resilient ecosystem there that is kept alive, like birds. There's some fish still as well, and the owls. But it's just very sad. And that's just the visual perspective. There's this odor that is unlike anything else. Sorry, I was at a literal loss for words because it is like a mix of like eggshells and like sewage and just something foul. And like when you come into interaction with that, you're like, this is just wrong, and it depresses me also because like I said earlier, there is so much history involved. There are so much of our story of Imperial County lies within the Salton Sea, and not just the bad stuff. Like there's a lot of good stuff. And even before that, before this was settled, there was a lot, millennia of history as well, and cosmic stories of the Korea people. And the fact that it's reduced to what we see and what we smell is just very sad. Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I will start off by saying that I am by no means an environmentalist, like a trained environmentalist, but I am somebody that I understand kind of like the ecosystem, and so I have a baseline understanding. So, please feel free to correct my environmental prescriptions. But two of the big things that are important to keep in mind is that there are two rivers that actively feed into the Salton Sea, and that is the New River and the Alamo River. As I mentioned before, I'm from Hopeville, and the Alamo River cuts throughout my city. And, we have like this trail around it and all this stuff, but the river doesn't just start there. The river cuts through Mexico and it stems off of like a different waterway. So it's hard to really, I bring all of this up because it's really hard to track. At one point, it's getting more and more polluted, right? There's no sort of mechanism that is actively tracking everything that is in there, right? Our area, when we talk about being like an underserved area, underfunded, so one of the things that isn't often captured is that like we just don't possess that kind of technology, right? We don't have that workforce of trained technicians to be able to tell us what exactly is going into it. But it's also important to note historically that I believe I'm blanking on the date, but there was an agreement made that allows the Alamo River and the New River to be, I believe, if not 2 or 3 times more polluted than what is allowed in the Clean Water Act. And when we think about that, it's like that should also affect your frame of reference, right? Your water was never going to be neutral. It was always dirty from the beginning. So when we talk about how we can start to make it better, there's kind of no record of a beginning, you know? So what we can assume now is that some of it will be industrial waste that's coming from Mexico across the river, and then as well water runoff or whatever kind of waste that gets into those channels. And so because the Salton Sea is just this closed body, it has nowhere to go, right? So I would say it's probably what's going around there, and that's only getting on like the kind of physical sort of aspect of it. We've only scratched the surface on what the health impacts are of actually living with the Salton Sea. And because of how critical the conditions are, it's hard to tell if that's something that we will actually be able to see in our lifetime, because, there's just so much pollution that's actually happening. So all that to say, it's really difficult to track pollution, but these two riverways that deposit at the Salton Sea are a good starting point to examine. So kind of going back to the health piece, there's the Salton Sea is evaporating, right? And coming from an evolutionary perspective, at some point it's going to completely evaporate because the earth is just getting hotter and there's nothing to feed it. Whenever they built the canals, they kind of disrupted a natural cycle of water flow, right? So unless we are actively feeding into it, it will dry off because of evolution. So with that receding playa, all of that exposed playa becomes dust and it gets picked up and it goes into like neighboring communities. I think also people have used it as a dumping ground in the past. And so I think people have just really lost respect for it, really. I think people view the Salton Sea more as a burden, really, than as something that's like living, breathing, something that requires that kind of level of attention, you know. It's complicated. It's complicated because so much has happened around the Salton Sea. There's so much history there that, like, even I could get this sort of history wrong. But at some point, that was a part of a larger gulf. And then there was like massive floods, right? And so, to give credit that this is purely an error of man, that would be just not fully accurate. But what I will say is that once the mess was made, man has not done, or community has not done enough to mitigate the mess that we have inherited, at the very least. And I think that that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, the environment is its own living, breathing thing. It doesn't care if it's 130 degrees outside. If it's getting hotter, it's only going to get hotter. And if the temperature shifts, then it's only going to get colder, right? But yeah, I wouldn't be able to just kind of say that we're solely to blame, but I do think that we're the ones that bear that responsibility. I think it's very inspiring. It's very inspiring and very illuminating, because I think, as somebody that values the environment and a tree hugger, for lack of a better term, but in a place that is so incredibly surrounded around like negativity and a lot of pessimism. And myself, earlier I described it as a depressing site. It is very refreshing to see that there are so many mitigation efforts underway, and it's local actors, the Imperial Irrigation District, of course, being probably the main driver of that, but also the partners that they have developed. There are so many different types of agencies out there doing so many really good things for the community that we could have a whole documentary just on the restoration efforts, right? And I think people forget that for a long time, not a lot of things were happening. And then the IID sued. They really stood on business, as the youth says, and they said, like, you're going to have to do something about this Salton Sea. And then we started to see that ecosystem of investment arise. So you got to give credit where credit's due, you know. But all that to say, it makes me very excited for the communities of Bombay Beach and West Shores on the other end, and all of the North End that really gets um, if you think the Salton Sea gets little attention, like talk to the people from Nyland, talk to the people from Slab City, Westmoreland, and I think like the people that live in that district, because there's so many parallels between what they're experiencing right now. Yeah, so there's actively an animal habitat restoration project happening in Hopeville, and I actually don't believe that they have um, did like a ribbon cutting or anything like that. But the whole goal, right, is for the water to kind of run more and to just literally physically create more habitats for birds that are migrating and all this good stuff. Keep in mind, I said I am not an environmentalist, you know, so like I get the big picture stuff, but the small details are still an area of opportunity for me. Um, so that's happening, and it's important to note, like, I'm actively running for Hopeful City Council, so I have been spending a lot of time learning about what's going on in my city, and the environment is something that I hold very dear. Can't have agriculture without the environment, and can't have earth without the environment. So, you know, naturally we land that this is important. So I've been following that sort of conversation, and that's been very illuminating, just how expensive environmental projects are and how expensive it actually is to take care of the land. But just because it's expensive doesn't mean it doesn't have to happen. In fact, I think that's all the more reason it should happen. It will be an investment, you know. I've also gone to the Sunny Bono Refuge. I think it's a refuge site. You know, it does smell funky, I will say, and it is, you know, I'm from Hopeful, and it's all the way over there in, I believe, Calapat, but it's so remarkable to still be able to take in like the essence of what we call home here and what is preserved. And like I said, I am a person that is actively looking for, you know, if I see something from the Salton Sea or something like that, like an event, I'm gonna go. You know, like I've partaken in Salton Sea strolls that are put on by I think it's the North End Action, North End, it's the North End 111 Alliance, actually. Great organization that's doing remarkable work for that community. So I have intentionally tried to understand what is going on when it comes to the Salton Sea. Let's take it from the top, right? So what we have recently found ourselves in, and recently, when we say that, that encaptures the last 10 years. This development has been in the works for the last 10 years, which is insane, right? So they discovered a deposit of lithium near the Salton Sea, and it's like miles away. It's not like they're not using anything from the Salton Sea. Nothing is happening directly on the Salton Sea. Everything is happening like further. But because that is like the geographical kind of identifier, it's closely assimilated. And it's important to note that whatever the effects of this lithium extraction process are, it will affect the Salton Sea region, right? Because that's where this is happening. So moving on, the intention behind this, right, is to create a sort of supply chain for electric vehicles using the lithium near the Salton Sea, right? So when I say in the Salton Sea, I'm never meaning actually there. I mean, it's like adjacent, some miles away. But this is also important where you have to keep up with reports and stuff, because when you hear that, you know, it could be misleading. But I think when you're trying to make things like us establishing a supply chain digestible, saying things like at the Salton Sea makes it simple, right? Anyways, I felt the need to clarify. So this is really an effort that isn't just sort of surfacing from the county. It is the state government is involved and the federal government is involved. So many people are really hoping that this kind of investment plans out. And at the local level, this presents an opportunity for us to welcome economic development, something that we have not seen in a long time. And that's no disrespect to what has happened, but when you live in the county that has the highest unemployment rate, for whatever the reason may be, you need to welcome economic development. I think about a phrase, well, I'll say that for later. So the goal is really for the community to be able to benefit from this, the creation of this supply chain to create lithium-based batteries for electric vehicles. And I think part of what makes it difficult to capture that here is because very few people here have electric vehicles. It seems almost dystopian and so incredibly far from where we are right now that it's hard to even really grasp, the idea of this supply chain being established here and the residents being the immediate beneficiaries of whatever's to come. And developers will talk to me and they'll be like, how can the word spread more? And I tell them, give everybody an EV. If you really think that these are as high and mighty as you're saying, you give every single person an EV and, give us the chargers and the infrastructure as well, because they're not going to be able to withstand these hope-filled roads with all these holes and with potholes and stuff. Anyway, I'll reel it back in. The whole point of the supply chain is to really help the rest of the state transition to a cleaner energy economy, right? By getting cars that run on gas and diesel off of the roads, which is the intention behind that is to reduce the emissions. And gas is also very expensive, and that's part of that balance. Even if some of the population moved, it would give some of the pressure out for being reliant on gas, while at the same time, when they make those electric vehicle batteries, that will say, this is made in Imperial County, right? And there's a great sense of pride in developing something that was not just extracted here, but was also manufactured here. And if done well, it was done by local labor. So that's kind of it in a gist. Lithium in general is extracted using these ponds, it's like sort of in a way fished out, and then I think about it as like like when you're in the sandbox and you're kind of like drying things. There's like this toy that you run like sift sand through, and then like the pebbles stay on top. So something sort of similar, right? It's like in these evaporation pods. I'm also not an expert on lithium, but this is my understanding. But the point of me trying to eliminate what that extraction looks like, and sometimes there's like pit mines, like actual pit mining involved. It has been known historically to be a very environmentally destructive process, right? So that's our frame of reference. That's what exists out there. Of course, technology is always evolving. Humans are always pushing, and we love intellectuals that are doing these amazing things. They have found a way to extract this lithium from. It's literally miles. Like when we're talking about like water getting extracted out. Well, let me start actually from the geothermal process. What's going to happen in Imperial County is going to be basically an extension of the ongoing geothermal industry that we have here, right? So using a similar geothermal process where water is pulled out from the earth and it spins a turbine, and that turbine generates electricity, and then it's sort of re-injected into the earth. Instead, there's going to be some sort of technology that will now absorb the lithium, and then the lithium will get refined, and then the lithium will get turned into it'll get ready for manufacturing, right? Here's the thing. This technology is new. And so we have the horror stories of the previous methods of how this lithium was extracted. We will not be able to know what the consequences of this will be until it actually starts to happen. And that is kind of a gamble. But I will say I would be wary of anybody who says that there is going to be no environmental effects, because that is just dishonest. Whether we like it or not, we have never extracted from this land. So this lithium being extracted alone itself is an effect. There was lithium there before, there is no lithium there anymore, right? Whatever the case may be. But I will also say that this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be destructive inherently just because it does have these changes, right? So we'll have to kind of wait and see how this develops. I know there's a lot of scholarship out there that has these sort of analogies between comparing what the lithium extraction that's happening here and what's happening in other places like Chile and and I believe in Australia as well. But what I will say is that we're in a very unique position because we have never seen something quite like this. And I also think that we should not shy away from these sorts of topics and questions, especially in an area that is prone to seismic activity. We're closely along the fault line. I think it would be organic for us to think that there would be maybe some sort of relationship there, as there is with this new emerging economy, like everything else. Nothing will be essentially the same after this development happens. And I will say that it has kind of stirred a bit of controversy. As I mentioned, through this role, I kind of convene people that wouldn't otherwise be sort of speaking and stuff. And so oftentimes I'll hear the perspective of the environmentalists, and then I'll hear like who are expressing very real concerns for the environment and what the consequences may be, but also those are the groups that are also advocating for the local jobs, for ensuring that, if you're going to bring a rail line that's going to extract lithium, then there should be a commuter rail line for the community as well. Whatever they get, we should sort of be matched with that same generosity and the same investment. On the other hand, I will also be meeting with bureaucrats and elected officials and industry leaders who I think are very excited about the development. And some of them, it's hard to kind of put everybody into one sort of category. Some of them, welcome that kind of healthy skepticism and the reality of like this entrepreneurship journey, that there's a lot of things that are unknown, whereas others are, I think, more concerned that any objection to the development will compromise or hinder the development, but my assessment of all of that is that we just have to be talking more. I think we're all trying to get to the same sort of outcome. We just need to sort of fine tune the details. What's kind of interesting, I will say, you think right naturally that I would be, based on what I've shared about the Salton Sea, that I would be so, maybe anti-lithium or perhaps more critical or anything like that. My concern isn't even necessarily on that, because I know they're going to figure that out. There will have to be some sort of balance between environmental conservation, mitigation, restoration, and that development. But my concern is that as a community, our workforce is not ready to take on these jobs, and our education has not been made competitive enough where if these jobs come, we will not be competitive applicants. That's really where my worry comes from. And I think I'm also, as a 25-year-old Gen Z, I'm feeling the effects of late stage capitalism, and there are very few jobs out there that will allow you to sustain a family. So my concern is more in that regard. And I think that because of the lack of investment that we have had in education historically, I think that people have forgotten that it is our responsibility to be the workforce for that emerging economy. But I think that people are not seeing themselves in that light yet. But I think it's because we're still, the conversation of Lithium Valley, although it's been 10 years in the making, people are barely kind of catching on to what's happening. And that's fine. There's so many things happening at the same time. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say I can't speak right in sort of blanket statements. I don't know everybody from education, right? But the folks that I have happened to learn from, particularly at IBC in their workforce development department, I have seen a genuine commitment to really finding out the right formula for this. And this is a person that I find very inspiring. The Dean of Workforce Development, Efrain Silva, he he and I, we interacted over this topic, and I used to go to IVC, and so it was it's kind of like a whole 360 moment, you know, like coming back home, and now this Lithium Valley development is going on. But he was also around at IBC during the solar panel era that we went, right? And he just shared with me in a very kind of considerate manner the learnings from that. And he said that the things that he is learning from there is like all around like the preparedness, you know, and like the meticulous attention to detail that has to go into a curriculum for it to be able to be done well. And so comparing that to the current plant operator program that's happening at IBC, which the goal is to get you to work at one of these facilities, and there's an internship involved where you get hands-on experience. And I think they've had just an amazing, stellar success. And there's more plans for more certifications and that kind of niche technique and skill set happening as the jobs are emerging, right? Because we only have the privilege of working with what's tangible, and that's with what's literally in front of us. So I believe right now there's like a plant operator curriculum, and then there's one for a chemistry tech curriculum as well, something along those lines. On the other hand, so Imperial Valley College is the heart of education of Imperial County, but San Diego State Imperial Valley is also a very strong partnership, and there's literally a whole physical STEM building campus that is hoping to help bridge some of these workforce and education gaps. So these testaments and kinds of seeds of investment are really good signs in my opinion, but I think that it has to go beyond that. I think the burden should not fall on Imperial Valley College or San Diego State. I think respectfully, when we look at our demographics, education has always been an area of improvement for us. 75% of the 180,000 people that live in Imperial County have a graduate high school, have a diploma or a GED. I believe it's like 8% of us have a bachelor's degree, and like 3% have a higher ed degree. So what this tells us is that your biggest time to kind of educate and really empower your workforce, because once you're done being a student, you're a worker. That's how capitalism works, right? So we need to be having that conversation about how to fortify education to make it competitive at the high school level, and like not just high school, K through 12. And we see how some of the campuses, particularly Calexico and Central Union High School, have managed to have STEM buildings. And I think that that's a great step in the right direction, and something that could be incorporated at the different school districts, but tailored to whatever local, like make it specific to that ecosystem. And I say this because, for example, in Hopeville, sorry, I'm going to throw a lot of Hopeville references. In Hopeville, we are largely an agriculture-based community, and I know that's the same for all of Imperial County, but for us, it's a little bit different. Like our local farmers are heavily supportive of local, like Future Farmers of America, you know, FFA. And I was a part of that as a high school student. So I know just how much of the community is supportive of that, and how much of the economy is supportive of that. And so if we could find a way to develop more, to invest, to have our FFA kids graduate with a certificate to become a welder, a plumber, an electrician, you know, these are trades and skills that are going to be necessary as long as there's homes, as long as there's cars, right? So really setting up the next generation of Hopevillians, in our case, to actually be competitive in the workforce, right? So that if you do want to do the Lithium Valley thing and undergo that curriculum, you at least have your carpentry gig or anything like that to kind of keep you afloat, because as we learned, nothing is free. I know a lot of people fear, right, that the profits from lithium will not equate the same as the reinvestment that they're hoping to see in the community. That's the big thing. I think everybody is excited, right, about the possibility of building this supply chain and all of these good stuff. But at the end of the day, if the community doesn't reap any of the benefits, then this will have been for nothing, because we have no desire to have only a couple of industry folk and developers line up their pockets. This is about reigniting a whole sector of our community that largely needs investment. And you can't really separate the environment from the community, right? And when you think about it, like, for example, in the last 10 years, we've seen cities along the north end, like the city of Nyland, lose that city status. And so this is a really big fear, because then if a community is sort of unable to have that sense of autonomy, the county will have to step in, and it's a bureaucratic nightmare. And I think that people are trying to, but on the other hand, what you don't want is just throw a bunch of money that displaces the original community that was there. So there are a lot of concerns out there, and I think there's a healthy amount of concerns, but I think our energy really needs to be trying to be focused on trying to find an alignment, trying to find that healthy middle ground. Like, if this development is happening, fine, but who's to say that it has to happen for the next indefinitely? How about we have it for 10 years and we'll have to re-examine the all of like the records that have been captured about like the environmental degradation or whatever, revisit that in 10 years and then make an assessment for like the next 10 years or something like that. But we have to really be talking about the procedure and how we're actually going to do this, which is, I think, something that's not really happening right now. I must also say that it's important to note that because we right now have been operating in survival mode, everybody works in their own little corner and everybody presumes to know everything about everyone. And that makes it difficult. That makes it difficult, not just to do something new, but to do anything. And it's just very telling of where kind of like the framework of operation that we need to step out of. We're operating very individualistically right now. I need to work more communal and like actually mean that, you know? I think these corporations think that they're doing a good job getting the word out. But I also think it's about who really bears the responsibility here of getting the word out. Like I mentioned earlier, the county has had 10 years, to really try to promote this project. And it hasn't been until recent that the cat has really got out of the bag, And I know that there's like rhetoric out there that says that they don't want to promise the beef before they have the cow. But I think like it's very easy to say blanket statements like that. And it's quite another to actually have a good relationship with your community. Right now, I think there's a big disconnect between elected officials and the regular average person, right? It's important to note that we're sitting in the county in the entire state that has the lowest voter turnout. I don't think that people are not voting because they don't want to. I think worse. I think people are voting because they have lost faith in this government. And it's hard to blame them. But I would also say, like, you cannot expect things to get better without doing things if you do things the same. And as a proud American, like, it is your responsibility to vote. That, my parents did not struggle to get into this country for me not to be an active voter now and to care about what's going on in my environment. But for the average person who's barely finding out about Lithium Valley, it is happening largely through county funds that have been allocated to community business organizations that already have those relationships. But again, I believe that there's a big piece missing here. Like, this should be being talked about at schools. There should be more like kind of like a press tour of sorts happening at the local level. And I would welcome more. I think we've also seen industry really try. There's been numerous community events where they try and go out there and, spread the information. And I think that's refreshing. But I also will add that we're in a place where we really need to reconceptualize what we mean when we're trying to get the word out, and doing outreach. We are at a place where it is only doing a PowerPoint presentation will only get you so far. We have to really take it a step further to make sure that our community, that we understand each other. And every community will be different, right? And if you value that, then hopefully that's sort of taken into consideration. But I will say that you are seeing a sort of emergence of community business organizations and industry relationship is emerging. Whether it's positive or negative, I'll leave that for your assessment, but a relationship is sort of kindling. I think it's because it's important to note that this Lithium Valley development is happening in the context of everything that has ever happened in Imperial County, right? You have to factor in the legacy of disenfranchisement, the fact that this is, again, it is the largest landmass county in the states, but with in California, but it's the one with the highest unemployment rates, highest asthma rates, highest rates of sexually transmitted infections among teenagers. You name the bad, we have it. However, now here's this opportunity before us, and it almost seems too good to be true. I think it seems too good to be true that an industry can come in and actually ignite your economy without it affecting your environment, even though it's based on extracting the mineral from your environment, right? Part of the marketing needs some work. But I think up until now, people have been operating under a scarcity mindset that there is only a finite amount of resources. And do not be fooled. There's so much money in Imperial County. There are like billion-dollar economy industries here. The issue is just about the circulation of money and how money has managed to circulate around. It is relatively new to be investing in your communities and in your environment, as we are seeing. We have not seen this kind of development before. So my assessment is that some of these community organizations and bureaucrats as well have managed to consolidate influence and power through positions, through networks, whatever the case may be. But because there's this idea that it is finite, they are greedy and they do not want to share. And I really do think that that is the root of our issues. And it is very tragic because there is nothing individual about agriculture. There is nothing individual about a society. There is nothing individual about a country. We share this among ourselves. And I don't mean to sound like some sort of communist rhetoric, right? But we share this land, we share this soil, we share this economy. We have to share the responsibility of ensuring that good things happen for our people, right? That's very simple. But yeah, I think we're unfortunately victims of a scarcity mindset. And I think we're scared to see what would happen if we start to share. I think because things would be fundamentally different. Yeah. And you might be shocked at my response because although it is, what is my hope for this investment, right, of Lithium Valley to be, you might think that it would be naturally something that's directly Lithium Valley related. But my highest hope is a little bit more different. My hope is that the agricultural community and the agricultural economy will absorb the technology and the innovation that has come, and that will make agriculture more resilient, right? When we're talking about, electric vehicles, see if that could translate to agriculture machinery. And when we're talking about like solar energy, instead of making a solar farm, here's an idea. Why don't you just put a solar panel on top of, whatever parking infrastructure you have at your farm or something like that? Like absorbing these innovations that will help nurture our traditional economy. I think there is such a resilient story to our agricultural upbringings, whether you're looking at it from the framework of a grower, an entrepreneur, or as the kid of farm working parents. That land has provided for us for a long time, And if we want to hope to see that it continues to do so for generations to come, then you have to nurture it. You have to feed it. And so I would hope that we would absorb that to make our existing economy just as competitive as that. I also hope that this development really delivers everything that it has promised to the community. You do not get to come into our community and get us excited for you to not deliver at the end. You have promised people post office. You have promised people infrastructure. You have promised people housing, education. You better deliver, because you have no idea what you are risking. A lot of us here have given up on hopes and dreams, and you have reignited people's spirits. And if you have done this solely for your opportunistic opportunity, well, the universe will have something for you, But I really do hope that whatever the development comes, that it allows us, people of Imperial County, to continue to enjoy Imperial County as it has been dear for us, and that even if the development doesn't happen, that whatever the attention or the networking, the relationship building, that they don't just leave, that they remember that we are a community here of people, of kindness and hard workers, and that you don't just view us as a host site for your extraction, that you actually care about what happens to us.